couple of months now since the Taliban swept into the city and took over the entire country. This new reality is looking extremely different. It's very bizarre to see Taliban fighters walking around owning the city.
Battle-hardened Taliban fighters have spent the last 20 years waging an insurgency against the US and its allies. Now they've taken the country back, and they're having a blast.
Commander Hanafi is just convincing a bunch of these Taliban guys to go on the pirate ship, which they're worried about because they say they're going to get motion sickness, which is, to be fair, what I'm worried about. Oh, these things make me very sick. Oh, make it stop.
Commander Najibullah Hanafi is the friendly face of the new Taliban, part of the softer image the regime wants to portray.
Question, would you ever put your gun down, or do you always need to be carrying your gun with you, even on these fairground rides?
نه همیشه بنوین خو سالو خود باید رسوی تروس خداسی سال پسال که امنیت شده نه ان شاء الله نه سالو خو مشکل نداره سالو بان کیرو نه د سالو گرزاول خداسی هغه مشکل نداره.
I mean, there's a lot of Taliban fighters here, but there's also a lot of families, a lot of kids. You don't think they might feel intimidated at all?
نه هیچ نوع مشکل نشه طول خوشحال دی و خوشحالی و راضی دی.
But not everyone is happy. When the US pulled out of the country in August, hundreds of thousands of foreigners and Afghans fled the country, fearing that the new Taliban regime would target anyone who worked against them. Now that the Taliban are in power, they're left with the challenge of becoming a legitimate government and keeping their citizens safe. We joined a night patrol with Commander Hanafi, who was keen to show us how they're bringing order to the capital.
What does your work entail in the evenings? How does it feel now to be rolling around previous Afghan governments, police vehicles, using American equipment, and being in charge of security yourself?
داس کې سوا چې د خلک ته غلط فکرونه ورکړل شوي او غلط تبلیغات ورته شوي وو چې دا ډېر ظالمانه او داسې بد خلک دي دا د تاسو وینئ چې دغه خلکو موږ بېرته خدمت کړو حال دا چې هغه زموږ دښمنان وو.
The sight of these fighters enforcing their security is welcomed by some and feared by others as a return to vigilante-style arrests.
Tell me who this guy is. What just happened? He looks very young. How old is he? And so what happens to him now? Are you doing okay?
No, Commander says do not ask questions.
I'm not allowed to ask him questions? So these guys just stopped and they've got this one 17-year-old kid in the back of their truck, but it's hard to tell what his crime is or what's going on because they won't let us talk to him. They're giving us a very controlled message about how safe and great everything is here. Do you feel like the general public trust you guys to keep this place safe? What's the biggest terrorist threat here?
But ISIS is here, and they're getting stronger. Since the Taliban swept to power, Afghanistan's Islamic State affiliate ISK has seized on the instability to ramp up attacks against the new government, undermining their authority.
In Afghanistan, there's been an explosion.
The latest in a series of attacks targeting civilians.
The Islamic State group said it carried out the attack.
ISK was founded in 2015 by disillusioned Taliban fighters. They accused the Taliban leadership of abandoning jihad and softening their stance in favour of international recognition. They seek an even more radical Islamic State. The group's resurgence has raised concerns that Afghanistan could again become a breeding ground for terrorists. Peri Salahuddin Ayyubi is one of the Taliban's most powerful military leaders, with a feared reputation. He was one of the first to enter the presidential palace when Kabul fell. Today, he's replaced the front lines with his new home, the eccentric palace of one-time Vice President Abdul Rashid Dostum.
یه جای جلسه‌اش است. در اینجا که ما مردم آمدیم فهمیم ماهی‌ها و چیزایش برابر است. نفر مقرر هستن. ماهی‌ها را سعی می‌کنیم.
Ayyubi oversees 13,000 fighters, and many across the country are looking to leaders like him to ensure their safety.
You've been at the forefront of some of the deadliest battles over the last couple of decades against the Afghan military as well as the US military. Do you have any regrets at all over how things have played out?
احساس پشیمانی نمی‌کنیم هر کسی اگر کسی دیگه هم بیاین هزاران نفر کشته میشن این برای ما چی نیستن ما چیزش نیست از شانهش قطع می‌کنیم که چنانچه که امریکا از شانهش قطع شدن.
What is your relationship with the US moving forward? President Biden has also said that ISIS-K is an enemy of the United States. Will you accept any diplomatic or military presence at all from the US here?
ما احتیاج به امریکا نداریم. ما چندیم از تمام نقاط افغانستان که بودن در هر جا بودن. ما احتیاج به هیچ کس نداریم. او بیاین برای ما چی بکنن. الحمدلله ما همینقدر کافی اندازه نیرو داریم که افغانستان دفاع بکنه.
Your job now is to secure the country to make sure that people are safe. Why are you not doing that?
100% حفاظت میکنیم. حالا حفاظت کردیم لیکن و این تو عملیات تروریستی عملیاتی که به ملت دهشت بیارن ایرا در هر کشور می باشن مردم میکنن در هر کشور لیکن ایرا گرفتاریش ایرا پیشرویش گرفتنش و امنیت گرفتنش بر ما مشکل نیست اینقدر.
But only days after this interview, Commander Ayyubi was proven wrong. Dozens of worshippers were killed by an Islamic State suicide bomber during Friday prayer in the northern city of Kunduz.
The ISIS Khorasan have claimed responsibility for the attack. This is the deadliest attack in the country since the US troop withdrawal.
The following week, ISK struck again, this time in Kandahar, the heartland of the Taliban stronghold in the south. CCTV cameras positioned around one of the biggest Shia mosques in the city captured the attack in gruesome detail. This footage shows two fighters storming the entrance. A suicide belt is detonated. Hundreds of worshippers who'd come to pray ran for their lives. A second, larger blast then explodes. At a nearby hospital, casualties streamed in.
There's about 70 or so casualties so far. They say about 36 people that have died. It's very hectic in here. This is your son?
He's my cousin.
Your cousin?
It's last Friday, his father died in Kunduz province.
No.
Yeah.
In the other explosion?
Yeah. And also today, his grandfather also died.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. What injuries does he have?
He have injury in his head.
This is shrapnel that's gone straight into his skull.
Yeah.
How's his mother doing?
Listen, every minute, she's calling me. She's asking about his son. His son? His son, Mama? Every day we are losing our family members. Nice.
14-year-old Maisam Rajabi clung on for 8 days before passing away.
These doctors have been fighting hard for everyone's lives. Those just passed away, they're taking him out to the north where there are 36 or so other bodies there at the moment. And that number is just rising.
Outside the hospital, Taliban security was on high alert.
So we are trying to make our situation under control and safety.
This new Taliban government has said that their number one priority is security. But the fact that there's been an increased number of explosions, including this huge one today, that doesn't bode very well for this new government.
نو د دې د مخکې خبره وایي چې دا طالبان پټونه کوي اوس مرته سبب د کې دا اوس پټونه سوکي نو دا مرته د دقیق نه معلومیږي خو څه چې د خلکو د ویناو څخه د خلکو د تجربه د مشرانو د غي حساب څخه مرته معلومیږي دا یا د ترهګریز د غدي مثال ډلې دي یا دا کم هغه کم دایښ چورته وای دا ډلې دی په مثال تراوي.
Hours later, ISK claimed responsibility for the attack, releasing a photograph of the apparent suicide bombers, along with a statement that boasted about how they'd bypassed Taliban security and made a farce of the new government's attempts to combat terrorism. The Taliban have since gone on the offensive, sending hundreds of special forces to combat ISIS. But those they're going after might not all be terrorists. We obtained a video that allegedly shows a former police officer from Kandahar's Panjwai district who was taken by Taliban forces and accused of belonging to ISK. We wanted to see how the Taliban are handling people they claim to be terrorists and criminals. So we visited Kandahar's central jail. Up until just a few months ago, it had been Taliban insurgents who were imprisoned here.
Visiting hours here, so it's very busy. All these prisoners are speaking to their families through the wire fences. There's a really, really strong smell of sewage here. Absolutely rancid. Look at all these flies.
دا خو هغه کسان چې امرزان کسان هغه دي چې کمزور دي ضعیف دي دا کسان چې اوس الحمدلله دومره برابر شوي دي چې جوړ دي اوس دا کسان چې هغه مدې خو ضروري اخو ته ضعیف کسان امرزان کسان اخو ته دي.
Mansouri Maulawi Sayeb is the warden who runs this jail. He agreed to show us around because he wants us to see how the Taliban are now using these detention facilities not for terrorists, but for heroin addicts in need of treatment.
And how many drug users do you have here at the moment?
تقریبا موږ 900 کسان بندیان لرو دلې او په دې کې 900 مکمل باغ ماته دي کسان یا نور جنایي کسان دي دلې د ترتیبان سره برابرۍ ترکه برابرۍ د بندیان دا بندیان دا مخکې دا کم نشانو ختمو.
So these guys are studying here?
قرآن شریفونه دي د منځو پښتنې چې منځونه نه یستا معتدین کسان دي دا دا کسان مخکې تاسو په اول حال کې دي وای خپل تاسو تجربه تاقت چې دا څه حالات لري دي یعنی ډیر ضعیف حالات وي انداز کسان پکې کې و چې موږ دا امید نور چې دي پاتې سي اوس الحمدلله هغه جوړ شوی دی روغ دي برابر دي سره.
Can I chat to some people?
خبرو سره دا کوي.
This is the person you want me to talk to.
انو اوس الحمدلله د خدای په ایله او د دغو مشرانو وړونو په دغه باندې په برکت سره موږ ډیر خوښ او ډیر ښایسته جوړ شوي یو او زه په خپله چې درته ولاړ یم دا چې زه تا بل داسې یو 2 میاشتې در مخه چې لیدلی وای زه هم زړه به دې نه وای راته ښه کړی.
Wow, what an advert.
It wasn't until the warden was out of earshot that we got the impression we weren't getting the full story.
What are you here for?
Outside.
Outside?
Yeah.
You can't talk in here?
Yeah, I can answer the question.
Because of who's in charge?
Maybe.
ډوډۍ نشته د ډوډۍ څه پراته یو الناس کې مشي ولا کسته نه دي.
So what is this section?
قتل ولا هم ستا غلا ولا هم ستا ډېر موضوعګان ولا پکښې کې دي اختطاف ولا پکښې کې دي دا ډېر مجرمین پکښې کې دي.
The Taliban have said that they're not going to seek revenge on their enemies, but is there anyone who's been brought here because they have been fighting against the Taliban or because they're an enemy of the Taliban?
Despite the warden's efforts to control who we did and didn't speak to, another prisoner approached us. He had 2 broken limbs and a disturbing story.
I have worked for a long time with them, 8 years, and they broken my hand and legs also, and I'm in the jail because I was working with Canadian as an interpreter.
Who are these people?
All of government.
As soon as the guards heard what prisoners started telling us, they shut us down.
Can we just speak to these people? Guys are literally chasing us out of the prison right now. It's clear that they're trying to give us a very sanitized view of what this prison does and the conditions here, but they're not really letting us see inside the cells or how they're really treating people.
We tracked down the family of the prisoner who told us he worked with foreigners. Several of his relatives also worked with the previous government and are now in hiding. They told us that several weeks ago, Taliban fighters came to their home in the middle of the night and arrested him, giving no reason at all. They say he's been charged with murder, but the family claims he was taken because he repeatedly worked for international forces during the war.
څلور کاله که 15 کاله کې دغه سره وکړي د چشتي دا هغه د امریکایانو سره وکړي په شفاخانه کې.
So this is a referral letter dated 2007 from Canadian NSE. I'm writing to provide a letter of reference and I would recommend his services to anyone without hesitation. A letter of appreciation in 2008. I would like to offer my thanks and appreciation for the excellent work you have done on our behalf. Your efforts have greatly added to the Canadian Task Force's ability to assist the government of Afghanistan. It seems like he was a great worker.
Oh, همدا خو نو چې دوی کوشش ورسره کړی وای د دغه میل قبول د کاناډایانو قبول کړی وای بیولای وای دوی بیچاره به ولې وسالته بندي چې دوی باندې هیڅ ظلم نه دستکان.
Have you been able to see him?
او داسې ژړله وای کوشش وکړي چې زه یې لاسم چې خلاصم زه مړ کېږم ما باسي وژني وای د شپې ما به وباسي مړ به مې کړي دوی په کم تور ورکړی.
I mean, when we saw him, he had 2 badly broken limbs. How did that happen?
دا ویل ول دا دوی راغلي دي دا شیطانات چې ورته کړي دي چې دوی د حکومت سایمان صاحب هم و ترجمان هم و په دا خاطر زه وایم شکنجې راکړي.
We asked the Canadian government what they were doing about cases like this. They declined to comment on specific individuals, but said that the alleged actions constitute serious human rights abuses. They write, "We call on the Taliban to effectively enforce the amnesty for former members of the Afghan security forces and former government officials to ensure that it's upheld across the country and throughout their ranks." But meanwhile, we found evidence of more violent incidents. Videos shared online claim to show other police officers, military personnel and interpreters who worked with the previous Afghan government or foreign forces. Many of them were allegedly detained without charges. Some were tortured, others were killed. We also spoke with a former Afghan army commando who was detained and is now in hiding.
دغه اوس که په ملي پولیس وسورسي ملي اردو باندې وسورسي په کمانډو وسورسيږي نو ټول وجني زه خو چې ونیول او ما ته چې تا پوج کې کار کړی دی او ته د افغانستان په ځانګړو ځواکونو کې وي مثال کمانډو کې وي هر سهار وختي بعد د ځانونو بچ کېدل موږ ته به والا کول وخلو بیا او بګانې به را باندې خېړول یعنی سخت شکنجه موږ ته راکړه اپا ما پنشته دی.
If these accusations are true, they go directly against the amnesty the Taliban regime promised when they took power. We sat down with Chief Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid to ask whether the leadership is using their newfound power and the threat of ISIS as an excuse to seek revenge on their enemies.
You say that you've given amnesty to all those people who worked against you. We met people in prison who say that they were put there and they've been beaten to a pulp because they worked with coalition forces.
هغه بله وجه ده داسې وبخښل چې د دې معنا دا نه ده چې هغوی نور هم جنایت وکړي ظلم وکړي یا چا حق وخوري هغوی نه به پوښتنه نه کېږي. ځینې خلک موږ پېژنو هغه بخښل خو ورته سوي وو ځینو اسلحې پټې کړې ځینې لاړه د بیت المال تیل یې پټ کړه ډېر جوړ کې موږ پېژنو او ځینې بیا داسې شخصي خصومتونو کې ونډې لرلې په بېلابېلو جرمونو باندې نیول شوي دي په دې وجه نه دي نیول شوي د تېر حکومت سره کار کړی هغه موضوع حل شوې ده.
Do you ever worry that now you guys are in control, that you're lacking the qualifications to run a country, to run a government, to run a justice system?
ولا هم د کار تر حده پورې وړتیا لرو وړ خلک هم په کار باندې بوخت دي متعهد خلک دي.
نعره تکبیر الله اکبر نعره تکبیر الله.
But for many Afghan civilians, the Taliban's talking points don't measure up. Last week, Human Rights Watch released a report that found similar instances of abuse, documenting over 100 ex-officials who've been killed and abducted by Taliban fighters in the last 3 months. Meanwhile, the Taliban themselves are struggling to reassure millions of Afghans that they are safe, as ISK continues to ramp up attacks, with the eventual goal of targeting the West. A day after the ISK attack in Kandahar, family members were digging the graves of their loved ones.
It's a pretty somber sight watching these guys bury row after row of dead bodies here. This is so far all the fatalities that have taken place from the explosion yesterday. And it's just heartbreaking for this community that after 20 years of war, that they still don't feel safe. Who are the people that are being buried?
Nawasai mama.
I'm so sorry.
Kinji dafan bishtarish jawan. Yani agar 5 nafar safed basha, diga kulli jawan. Kulli jawan. Kulli jawan.
Do you feel like after this, your community is safe?
Ki jair ba man nishan badi kya amna. Jang aram na shud. Kuja jang khatam na shud. Jang agar aram mi buchara 62 nafar inji mami awardim dafan me.
Who do you blame for what happened?
Would diga ma chiboge malba khir boge. Khir boge.
اصلی امریکا خودش ناکام شد در افغانستان علی میخوای که برادران طالب ما رو بترسانه ما هر چی که میبینیم از چشم امریکا میبینیم کشور ما که خراب کرد با نزاع انداخت
برادرای یک گفی دیگه یک صلوات محمدی بگین اللهم صل علی محمد و آل محمد
یا زهرا
لبیک یا زهرا
یا زهرا
لبیک یا زهرا
حیدری
این خاک مایا با سرخ نگاه میکن شیار هیچ کس نمیتونه از این مملکت بیرون کنه اصلاً